appear that we actually go live. And it says we're live. Good morning.
We are live.
It's
Good morning.
Spencer Foreman, joined by the legendary Kathy Zant. Kathy, thank you for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be here. When you invited me on, I was like, yeah, this is cool. I can't wait to hang out with you. Like, we had such a good time at WordCamp US, hanging out, chatting for such a long time. And then, yeah, so I'm happy to be here.
We're gonna dive deep into this, but you and I know each other for so many years now. And what's interesting is, hold on, I'm going to do my sound check, because if I don't do the sound check, everybody says, Spence, I can't hear you. Let's make sure we're actually broadcasting. And then I'm going to dive into this it's working. Okay, so that's a great start. First of all, happy 5th of July. Secondly, you and I have known each other for so many years, and we've had a lot of fun. Today, by the way, I'm going full Mike Brady with the humidity for our GenX references. But we've had so much fun. The last time we were in person together was in Maryland, and with the whole crew in the gang. But what I would think is useful for those who are joining us today, and thank you everybody who's popping in, is you and I share so much in common, and then the synchronicity of the universe connected us again. And just at the moment when I was like probably thinking to ask you again about stuff we'd talked about in the past, you reached out to me, and I was like, Shazam. And then I did the whole Spencer Foreman thing on you. We'll talk about it, where it was like, here's 10,000 things that I have ready to talk about. So I'm very, very happy to see you this morning. And today we're going to do something a little different, because normally in my office hours, I'm sort of like hands-on, practical. Today we're going to talk about this minute launch. We're going to talk about LaunchKit. We're going to talk about GenX mindset, GenX resiliency, GenX business, GenX security, everything about what I think we're going to have as a topic for future collaboration, which we're going to be a little squishy about today, but enough to say those who share the kind of thoughts that we go through will immediately resonate with what we're going to talk about. And I think that's what's turned out to be true for me, at least, to be a happy base of clients.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, GenX, raised on hose water and neglect. And look at us now.
I also noticed, by the way, as part of my being very okay with being imperfect, I noticed as I'm sitting in this sort of new home setup and stuff, that I didn't realize that I brought a bag of things to be moved that is, and I don't really care, but I do notice it behind my head. All right, so let's start out with, first of all, a little backstory, because I know you, a lot of people in my audience know you, but like, could you sort of give a little intro? Because I think your background in WordPress, your background in security, your background in other areas of business and life are useful. Would you give us a little like wrap up of Kathy Zant?
Sure. Well, grew up around Chicago. So Spence and I have that connection, you know, the Chicago. We just got a Portillo's in my town. I just have to mention that I feel like now
it's super dog, you're totally all in, but Portillo's is a good start.
Yeah. Now we drive past the In-N-Out to go to Portillo's, and my whole family's happy. Like, my husband, who grew up in New York, has never had a Chicago dog in all of his years. So now it's so a little bit of Chicago here. I bring Chicago with me wherever I go. And so I started, you know, my education is in speech communication. I was on like the speech team and the debate team and all of that stuff. But when the internet came around, I was like, this is going to be huge, and I want to learn it. Taught myself to code, ran a major airlines website for a while, started my own agency, and then I ran away to the mountains after a little bit of, you know, just being very deep in web development. But it was always like a part of me. So I was like using WordPress. I still have a backup of one of my first WordPress sites, version 2.
Right.
And
what year did you start in WordPress, Kathy?
Did I start like in the community, actually? Like
when did you realize you were actually using WordPress, like as a thing rather than a curiosity and some, you know?
Yeah,
servers?
well, so I was building all my sites using I grew up on ASP and SQL Server, and it made me angry enough to the point that when they went to .NET, I was like, yeah, I'm not going there. Let's do this whole PHP MySQL. So I learned that. And then when I found WordPress and it was using the same database class that I was using to address the database and the PHP code, I'm like, oh, well, this is way better than movable type. Well, I'm going to use this instead because it's thinking the same way I am, that content belongs in a database, and you use your scripts to address that, because, back in the day, we were like changing the way our blogs looked every other week. It's like, oh, let's theme it this way. And so it was just ridiculous for like to have like HTML files output, and then you'd have to rebuild all of that stuff. It's just like, okay, well, let's theme it. And it just made so much more sense. I didn't start moving like client work over until like when Automatic bought WooCommerce. Then I was like, okay, that was like kind of my sign of like, I'm going to stop building shopping carts from scratch myself, and I'm going to stop maintaining my own code, and I am going to use this stuff because these people have to be smarter than me. I chuckle because then I got into the security aspect. I mean, I was in the security aspect way before that. The first server I had that got hacked was in the 1990s.
I mean, that had to be about what, 2010 or so, because
yeah, about 2010, 2012, I think, is when I first started like, well, about 2010, 2012 was when I started like, okay, I'm not going to write my own code anymore. I'm not going to maintain my own code bases, because I had just like built all my stuff bespoke myself. Right. And so I started doing that. And then stuff started getting hacked. And then I was like, all right, I'll put this back together. But I was kind of just doing it on the side. I was raising my kids. I was in the mountains. I wanted freedom and flexibility, that if I wanted to close up shop and go to run around in a meadow with golden retrievers, I could do that. And so I didn't really want like a full-time gig. I wanted more freedom and flexibility. And so I was doing like half-time stuff. And then a company put out a call for people who could clean hacked sites. And I saw it just like in a footer of an email. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. That's fun. I'll do that just on the side. And they sucked me in. And then I was like going to WordCamps and giving speeches, and it all kind of came full circle. So it was really weird. Yeah.
Was the company an agency, or was it a WordPress related product maker?
Yeah, it was a security plugin. WordFence had put out that call. Okay. So I was just cleaning hack sites for them, on the side. And I told them specifically, I'll do this 20 hours a week max. That's it. But the further I started seeing what hackers were doing, and working with clients was actually kind of fun. And it was kind of this thing I could just do on this. I just got kind of sucked in, and then I'm director of marketing there. Like, how
I was going to say, like, the story of how people get into WordPress is interesting, because I recall, and I say so often, that many of us who were goofing around using cPanel, and it's like, oh, there's a Joomla, Drupal, this WordPress that looks like it's a fork of B2, all that early days experimentation. You woke up one day and there was a bunch of people sitting around the campfire. But then those campfires turned into groups of people that were selling some things, not just for a cup of coffee. Yeah. And then, wake up 20 years later, and WordPress, WordFence, of course, is a big name. And I would say it's fair to say your expertise in security now is one of the badges that differentiates you.
Yeah.
Right? From all those years.
It wasn't like I decided to go be a WordPress security expert. I kind of, like, when I was developing, I felt that security was something that everyone should understand and know. And it's just part of being a developer, I mean, when I did work for that one company, and I inherited this server from a very technical person, and I expected it to be set up properly, I didn't go like audit that. I was like, okay, they knew what they were doing. And then it got hacked, and I got sent to security school, which was amazing and awesome. And I got to learn all of this stuff, but this was like in the 90s. Right. And so I just incorporated what I learned. I mean, this was pre SQL injections. I remember when SQL, I'm like, oh, wow, new thing I got to protect against. I remember. So my security understanding was always just kind of like along the path of being a developer. That was just a part of it. But yeah, I was never like, oh, I'm going to go be a WordPress.
Well, because I think when you say, like, when you acquire these skills, I'm reminded of that cliche of, let's say I bring them like out of the dead, but like Steve Jobs learned calligraphy because he took a class that he audited
Yeah.
about like fonts or something like that, or what was called calligraphy at the time, and how that later became useful. I think of a lot of the skills that many of us have in WordPress. And at the time, it didn't really seem like you, at least I'm saying, it didn't seem like one was specifically trying to become an expert at security or HTML or PHP or MySQL Server or any of that. It was just sort of like, well, I need to make a log cabin and here's an axe and I got to cut something down and carve it. And you just acquired enough. And I think I want to harken back to that because I want to talk later about the differences between today's WordPress core community versus the way it was. That resiliency, that like, look, get an axe, chop a tree down, nobody cares, make mistakes, had two
Hmm.
factors to it that are different. One, nobody was like observing you with a million eyeballs of, oh, look at Spence, he really messed up today. And number two, about the security, nobody really knew or cared about WordPress sites. So there wasn't an incentive, I think,
Right.
for a lot of people to be hunting down WordPress. In fact, I'd venture to say it was very under the radar until mid 2000s, probably, right? I mean, late 2000s, perhaps. Like you said, maybe when Woo ended up selling their stuff to Automatic and so forth. So
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting difference because I miss, but not in a nostalgic way, I miss the ability for people to use tools and skills that are otherwise available to them to self-learn. Give you one example. I use all the chat GPTs and everything else to help me develop, but my coding skills, my coding chops started with CSS and HTML, and it worked into PHP and then, JavaScript, jQuery. For
Yeah.
somebody to go from like hello to React is like,
Right.
it's like me launching a rocket into space. And I think that disincentivizes a lot of the creativity. What do you think about that
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think I would, I made a choice at one point. Like I can read PHP and I can go write PHP and I guess. But like if I was going to go like work for a company as a developer, like I'm not a JavaScript person very well. Like I can understand enough of it to be dangerous and I can see when it's obfuscated, that kind of stuff. I'm enough to be dangerous type of person when it comes to that. But if I had to go like get a job as a developer, it would be overwhelming. I don't know any JavaScript frameworks, and I'm so behind on CSS anymore. It's just not a thing. But I think it's really important for everyone to know that that's not impossible to learn, because when you really come down to it, everything that you see on the internet is basically those components. It is HTML in a browser that is supported by CSS and JavaScript. Period. There might be a database, there's back-end stuff happening, there's all of these other things, but when it comes right down to it, the end goal is a working web page, right? And that's
I mean, right?
not
What they
that
read,
complicated. Yeah,
it doesn't matter how it got there.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, literally, someone could go just like open a text that, those HTML. My shopping cart, I still have the code from my shopping cart. And so I put it up once just to see, like, does it still work? And it still worked. And you know what? Way faster than WooCommerce. Like I could go back to that. Like if I wanted to go like write the most simple shopping cart and just take that code and make sure it's all secure. Like I don't even know. I haven't looked at it in so long, but it still works. PHP basic things still work. There are new tools that come along and new functionality that comes along, but the base functionality of the internet really hasn't changed. You have servers sending things to a browser that are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Yeah.
It's
And on
so
a flat screen that we currently look at, but
yeah,
this is something I'll bring in. Like, so for the second, reminiscing, but not really so nostalgic, is when you created stuff, it wasn't necessarily that you were worried about security and you weren't so much worried about mistakes, but you were free to kind of like build it, like I say, change the engines on the airplane while the plane is in the air. So when it came to stuff, you could do what many of us call MVP, or many of us call like old school, like just figure it out. And for me as a business
right.
person, for me as a Gen Xer, the ideas of when I was a kid was If I had a business, I would just go around, knock on doors, go put flyers on windshields of cars. I wouldn't sit there and overthink it like I had to go out and get social media and VC investment and everybody rallying behind me, and I wasn't worried about everybody crushing me. Now, here's how I tie that to WordPress. The problem with WordPress now, which is not a problem, it's a way, I want to say it in a different way. The WordPress friction that didn't exist today is, I think it's a disincentive to upstarts or individuals or whatever age they may be from just dipping their toe in the water, because as soon as they do something, say something, try something, you have two problems at hand. Number one, the core is being changed like every moment of every day into, we're screw you guys, we're going for this and come along for the ride or not, versus the old days when there was actually a kind of small enough community to discuss it. And number two is, there are some bigger players. The bigger players are not of the let's all have fun around the campfire mindset. So as soon as you do something that creates a good idea, immediately the curtain comes down on you in some way or another. And so that, to me, disincentivizes a lot of smart individuals from just contributing things that maybe all they wanted to do was like put like a toothpick in the pile, not like a log.
Right.
And to me, there's ways that I see around that. But one of the ways around that is the very same thing that WordPress was built on, was this open source principle. And even though React and all these other things exist, one can still work with the basic tools. Like you said, there are plugins, there are functions that are literally a snippet of HTML with a little sprinkle of CSS, and they do just fine. There's short codes, which have lived forever. There are ways to, using the tools of today, take something, copy it from somebody else, change one or two things, add it back in, because instead of, and this is my last part of this, instead of arguing that you have to reinvent everything, I, like yourself, don't feel that I should be offering my clients or anybody who buys my stuff code like in the early days of WordPress. Instead, everything should be like a Lego block or an IKEA piece of furniture. You buy it, you look at the directions that are with no words, they're just pictures, and you snap it in, snap it out, because that provides a future proofing versus the original days of WordPress. While they were wonderful, one person's little spaghetti code could break your site, or it could be limiting your site to being, like, let's say, non-future proofed.
Sure.
So
yeah,
that was
there's, I think there's it's a more mature ecosystem now, and there are more dependencies. In the early days, there was much more. Well, in the early days of the web, it was all about experimentation. It was all about innovation. It was all about try this new thing. And there were so few people who were out there doing it. It was very Wild West, but there was a lot, and there were a lot of breaking of things, but the creativity that came out of that, the I'm just going to do this.
I mean, many of the core features that we have today were started by some of the, I mean, it's like Geezer Town, but like Pippin Williamson created some of the best original features that later became certain things. You got Justin Fairman, who's kicking around back, but with LearnDash, that was of the LMS. And there's still, I mean, I go down the list, but there's a reasonably short list of key features that were plugins that started out in this method, right? They didn't just come on full stream. It was like, hey, I have an idea for this thing, and you can put a, blankety blank on the screen. Now, I don't want to be glass half empty kind of guy, because one of the things about this GenX stuff, and let's clarify, it could be borderline boomer or all the way into boomer. And I'm not a big boomer fan, but like, I recognize that I'm bordering boomer town. It's more of the difference between if you came into the ecosystem today and you didn't have this history of being like us, left to your own devices by your parents, you might find it very frustrating when you look at the politics, when you look at the business ecosystem, when you look at the scale and scope of WordPress. But I want to share a couple of things for people from the inside. And this is what was fun about going to WordCamps. And I'm going to, more likely than not, I mean, I'm probably going to go to Portland, even if it's on the way to a wedding that I'm going to go to in Vegas. But like, the idea is, when you go to WordCamp, number one, the first thing that I recognize, and I mean the national WordCamp, is that there's a very small group of people that actually make a lot of the stuff. So if you thought of it like a farmer's market, there's not 70,000 big names. There's a few hundred, maybe in the few dozens of big names that have a lot of influence and a lot of stuff going on. And everybody else is sort of like at the farmer's market, the flea market, those smaller booths or the people with the rolling carts, which are still equally important in their own way. But it reminds me of like when you're using Italian mafia movie references, like you got out and they keep pulling you back in. It's like a Francis Ford Coppola movie where it's just all of us sitting around some kind of dinner table yelling at each other and throwing stuff at each other. And I think that's important because when we've been at WordCamp, we've had conversations, or when I've been on other shows and things talking to people, whether it's Matt Mullenweg or other people, everybody is a human being, but not everybody thinks they should do it the same way. And there's no like one rule that applies to everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm not, without going on a diatribe, I want to ask your opinion on this from the inside, because you've had working with some of the larger companies, right? And feel free to elaborate after WordFence. With Cadence and everything else,
Sure.
right? Liquid
Sure.
Web. There's lots of stuff that goes on that to the outside world, you would think there'd be more logic to, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there was really some big plan. Sometimes a lot of stuff gets decided spontaneously or in reaction to other things. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, the Cadence team, Cadence is a unique unicorn in the way that Ben Rittner and his sister Hannah built that product, that business. And Ben really put an emphasis on listening to customers. So yes, there is a broader vision. The AI stuff all came in from higher level discussions and everything, but they always balance that out with what customers are asking for, customers are needing. And so in that way, the decisions of what happens with Cadence have always been very impressive. It's always very much on the people who are using the product. What do they need? And in answering that. So, but, there's obviously, complexities. The bigger the product gets, the more people who are using it, the more plugin compatibility issues come in, hosting provider issue, like it becomes just like a QA challenge. And that's,
Well,
when I was at WordFence, that was like 4 million install base at that time, and QA for that was rigorous because you don't want to take down your customer's site. Yeah, you just do not want to break things. So it's interesting though, because trying to keep things innovating, when you're in a larger organization and you have shareholders who want, profitability, and you've got all of these other business pressures, the bigger you get, the harder it is. But if your leadership really stays focused on customers and what the customers need, you're serving a market, right? But you're also serving individual customers. And as long as you can extrapolate that, I always feel like, for me, my idea of marketing was just understanding your people, understanding your customers, and then extrapolating that out. Because if there's one who needs this one thing, there's got to be 10, 30, 10,000 other ones who need it too. So understanding your market and understanding your people. So,
I want to dig in on that because Cadence and Ben and Hannah, I think, are a unique situation that in a way is one of the reasons that I've committed a lot of the effort that I've been making with LaunchKit and everything else to Cadence. There's a spirit of entrepreneurship there that could be as a result of their own individual personalities, but I also think that it's a philosophy, a mindset that is not what I want to call win at all costs. When you speak about a decision in a world of infinite technology, in a world of infinite financial leverage, in a world of infinite social sniping or politics, where you can take people down to take them down, one of the things that I get from the overall vibe of like what Ben and Hannah are doing with Cadence, it doesn't mean at the exclusion of other products, but in specific terms, that product, is that they're really still vested almost at the same level and mindset as they were when they started with it, right? Whether it's like the first customer, the first 100, the first 1,000, sometimes I would agree it's got to be very difficult because like they're always adding new features or trying to be competitive, and some of the customer base will be upset, right? Like, why are you working on this instead of that? But
Sure.
you,
Sure.
you can never
Yeah.
please everybody. But
Yeah.
I want to compare and contrast that though, and see what you think about this. There are other actors in the WordPress space. We won't have to say specifically because I'm not trying to be controversial here, who seem to have lost the the two things that really WordPress made everything so special around. One is that everybody is trying to be self-sufficient or able to use their products without having to be told this is the only way to do it or you're locked
Mhm.
inside of our gilded cage. And number two is, I think at the human level, that's where that GenX connection, that mindset of who do we serve
Yeah.
on a spiritual level, capitalism level, it doesn't make a difference. But like as soon as you lose respect for the human beings that are your customers by your actions as a corporation, I feel like that changes the equation. So, I mean, give me some of your feedback on that. I've been very vocal, of course, where there are some, I like to say, good people who have lost their way in a larger corporation and made decisions that are, I will say, disrespectful of the humanity of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that it happens, you know? People get into fear states is all I can say, is that their security, you know, and I'm not talking about anybody that, but
No
I've
specific.
seen the pattern. People get into fear states and then they lose a sense of themselves. They compromise. They compromise their integrity, they compromise their sense of self, they compromise what they started. Um, and this is, I'm not talking about anybody.
No, we're, by the way,
But it
I'm giving you,
happens.
I
This
want
is
to
what
give you a
happens.
full timeout. The views expressed on this show are those of Spencer
Yeah.
Foreman and Kathy Zant is under no pressure to name any names or specific
Yeah.
details. Any
But
representations are purely fictional. I
yeah,
don't
but
want
it
you to name.
happens though. Things get, I think about, you know, here, I'll talk about the pressures that I think, and I'm just projecting, that Matt Mullenweg must feel having Automatic. And I know he's taken investment on, so he's got investors that he's got to answer to, and the pressures of that on top of stewarding, you know, a giant project that, you know, and I complain about like, we're growing, we need better QA, that kind of thing. Can you imagine, like, the pressures have to be immense, and you just have to hire incredibly intelligent people and stay true to your integrity, um, because your security, you know, that I think people get into places where they feel insecure and they make decisions that maybe aren't the best because they are fearful of their security,
Did you
their
see, by the
financial
way,
security.
I mean, that raises immediately like in my head. Did you see the interview or as a YouTube zip on the guy who is the founder of the iced tea company that just, you know, they sold those big teas for 99 cents in the cans. I don't know why I'm having
Okay.
a,
Arizona
so
iced teas? Those
uh
guys?
what's the name?
Arizona?
Arizona iced tea. Thanks. Thank you for
Okay.
that was my senior moment, by the way. Um the Arizona iced tea founder CEO was being interviewed, and in a world where McDonald's is charging $28 for 4 egg McMuffins and, you know, hurting the people who really need not to have that happen, and there's no financial justification for that at all. He says, "We're successful. Why do we need to hurt the people that benefit the most from our product?" And I agree with your fear state thing. Like, in other words, a person in position of having to serve several masters, let's say,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
oftentimes challenged. I wouldn't want to change places with that person, even a Matt
Yeah.
Mullenweg. But on the other hand, I think one of the things that's important, one of the things that you and I had discussed wanting to talk about and dive into for future collaboration here is, how does one in 2024 and beyond, with infinite technology, compete against A, traditional corporations that are run by people who may or may not be in a fear state, B,
Mm.
infinite leverage of capital, when a company with somebody in charge who does not know, care, or think about the humanity has infinite capital. I will name a company like a Blackstone, who's around
Mhm.
the world buying every single family home ever and making it
Yeah.
impossible for them. Or C has a situation where it's it's not so much that they can't do it, but there's not somebody who's chosen to take a stand like this Arizona iced tea guy who has said, look, how much do we need? Like, how much is enough? And I think that that's the focal point, is like, there are ways to succeed. I bring it back to WordPress for a moment, in that the open source, I don't want to start a fight with anybody in WordPress about what I'm doing with it. But if I follow the letter of the law, if I follow what open source is, it is the Achilles heel that remedies those problems, because open source allows anybody to take the code and do what they want to do with it within the scope of open source licenses. And that includes, well, I'm going to provide better humanity, better service, better convenience, better administrative. I'm going to create something like with LaunchKit, I'm tying this in here, where this is what I think WordPress as a service would be, should be, could be. And all the other stuff's fine. You guys go do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to give one last thing in there. Like, I remember in the days before, everybody had a Android iPhone, when they would charge on my Nextel flip phone or whatever phone I had at the time, they used to charge 25 cents to send a text message. And at the time, you were just happy that it worked. But then after a while, it started to feel like, you're charging me 25 cents to send like a blip.
Yeah.
And it got ridiculous. It was only when people called them out on it that the emperor was wearing no clothes. And I feel like that's the environment we're at today, where you and I have a lot of things to share with people about how you can attract customers by addressing the humanity, the common sense, okay, that was a lot, but dive in.
Yeah. Well, so the things that are popping in my head really, so I was in this community. I've been in I'm not just like, oh gosh, wake up one day and I'm just like WordPress forever. There's other things that I'm interested in. And so I'm like in other communities and such. And people ask sometimes, I don't know about WordPress. Can someone please teach me about WordPress? And I'm like, YouTube. Like, there are tons of people, there are tons of tutorials. I could point them to any one of them. Yeah, but I really want someone here to help me. Like, they want somebody that's going to share their values, that's going to be in a position where there's just connection and trust. Trust is so foundational for every single business, no matter if you're selling iced tea, you're a McDonald's, or, like, look what's happening with Chipotle. Everybody's like going to town on Chipotle because the bowls and burritos aren't the same size anymore, and you have to go with your phone and like
double check. Got their phone, now $40 for a bowl.
Yeah, I remember $6.50 for a burrito. Now I'm paying like $12, and crazy. Anyway, I don't even eat it. My daughter's like crazy about it though. But like, there's a trust factor that people remember going and getting a copious amounts of food for $6.50, and now they're paying $12 and they're getting a stingy amount. Trust has been broken, and people want to know that the people they're doing business with, that they can trust. WordPress as a whole is it's a mature system. If there's a security vulnerability, I have my people that I'm like, oh, I know you have this on your site. Please make sure you patch this because of that. Like I have my people that I help, and I know what's on their site. And so I am their expert help to alert them, to ring the bell when there's something that they need to pay attention to. I am the one that translates what full site editing means. Like, we're in the system. We understand the conversation about full site editing, block themes, all of this stuff, right? My people, they don't know, they don't care, they don't want to care. They will come to me to get an answer. And so people in WordPress, there's one opportunity for you to be that person, to be an expert, to be the way shower for people
concierge?
The concierge.
That's my chosen word, by the way, for that.
Yeah. And like, what you're doing with like all of this is what you're doing. You're helping people understand so that they can focus on running their business. They don't have to figure out like, what do I do for a landing page, or what do I do? Like, you've got them handled. You're their person. And I think there's so much opportunity for people in WordPress to do that. Every business, it's the most important thing is to be a trusted advisor. Be the person that they're going to be like, oh, I know I can ask Spence about this.
But isn't that, by the way, the point? I mean, because let's talk about, I'm going to talk later today with our good friend Robert Cairns, and he's in Toronto. When I visit Toronto, because my kids and I are big hockey fans, and we live in Chicago, so we like to go up there. It's around the corner. I talk about the story. I like to go to the Four Seasons. It was the original Four Seasons. Doesn't make a difference, but it's really nice. It's super fun location. It doesn't cost a fortune, but what you get there is the concierge experience, which is to say there's 800 different things that could screw up a simple trip from Chicago to Toronto. But if I go to the Four Seasons, whether we drive or fly, I'm guaranteed that everything will be smooth. Here's why. Maybe there's something with the traffic or the construction. The concierge figures out which side of the hotel to be on, or they get me tickets to something I couldn't get, or they recognize that, oh, it's Sunday, there's a 2-for-1 on this or whatever. The cost of guaranteeing that you're getting from where you were to where you want to be is minuscule compared to the guarantee of success. And when I apply that logic back to, I want to tie this all together to GenX, because this is what I teach. In the early days of WordPress, we had, like we just discussed, hey man, cut a tree down and see what you can make out of it and share it with everybody. It's cool. Now you don't have that ability because of all the reasons we discussed. What people want now is spends. I have no time. I'm overwhelmed. The world's moving at 1,000 miles an hour. And I remember the days when I used to be able to talk to a person. Can you be that person who essentially is like the concierge at the hotel of the Four Seasons, who guarantee my trip to my business destination for this website turns out?
Yeah.
And Anne is a good example of, she's actually a fellow Gen Xers, but she's over here in upper Wisconsin. And the goal that I think that we've been able to achieve, that I want to share, we're going to be squishy about it, but you and I are going to be doing more content and more stuff together, is what if you reinvented yourself as somebody in WordPress who has just a small subset of skills, but you used a standardized set of tools, so you had a buffer, concierge of your own, to ensure that the madness of what's going on in the big family, but small family, the politics, the bad act, if all of that stuff could be insulated from you, much like if you went to IKEA, or if you no ketchup on hot dogs, if you went to the Lego store, no matter what era you've been going in for the last 50 years, you can buy Legos today on eBay. You could get them at the store. You can go to IKEA, get meatballs. You can still enjoy walking around with your kids and buy some furniture. By standardizing the things you can do, somebody, and Anne is one of them too, you could find an audience for whom you can be the concierge, and you can deliver results, outputs, outcomes of what they need in a world where everybody is left with, honestly, the pressure of so many things are new and changing, but I know my business needs these things, or I know my website needs these things. I don't even know where to begin. Or worse, I go online and I search and I see 20 years of blog posts, all of them conflicting of which plugin to use and how to do it. And there's no possible way for it. So, like, this is what I think you and I really share in common. When I was attracted to the idea of working together with you, I had been banging this idea around for a while, and Marilyn was last, I can't believe I was going to say almost like a year ago, but like it was last August, September. The idea is that over that last year, things have happened in the WordPress space and the plugins and the features that we have essentially everything we need in a way that most of my clients now who come on and use it are simply able to press a button, get the stuff they need from the IKEA store, the Lego store, without the aggravation of the multiple subscriptions, without the politics of like what's gotten broken, without the admin wizards taking them away to somewhere else. And by stabilizing that environment, they're able to use WordPress, I like to say, in the good old fashioned way, which is, thank you, Brendan, by the way, for the very nice compliment, is that GenX sensibility rules. Here's your computer. Here's your computer stylus. I'm holding up a piece of paper. And guess what? Uncle Spence and the team of people that are on the same place can make cool stuff that everybody shares so that we can apply our mindset, our sensibility to doing things that serve other human beings who will be your clients, versus maybe in the old days when you had to build stuff, you had to make stuff. Now, I'm begging the question because I know you're on the same page, but like fill in your I don't know, accents on that concept.
Yeah, well, like one of the talks that I used to give at WordCamps was how to evaluate plugins because, well, when I was doing the whole security shtick, that was talking about the problem without talking about the problem. You know what I mean? Because nobody really wanted the security talks, don't talk scary things about WordPress, but evaluating plugins. How do you decide where you're going to, because when you decide, okay, I'm going to sell things or I'm going to do an LMS system, you are now putting your content into someone else's structure. How do
Right.
you make that kind of commitment, right? It's like getting married. You have to decide. You have to go through this dating period of evaluating these plugins. And I'll tell you what, I'd go to these word camps, like a local one, a small one, and I'd sit next to somebody who'd have the schedule and say, I think I'm going to go to this thing on Bash. And I'm like, oh, honey, you do not want to go to the thing on Bash. Just
A bash
here,
script.
let's
I haven't heard that one in like 25 years, Kathy.
I'm like, let's pick some other things that are a little more useful for what you're trying to do with your blog, right? She was not a
Python
developer. She was
anyone?
just trying to WordPress, right? Um, so evaluating a plugin for these people is extremely difficult. So, as soon as you can establish your expertise and you do that by being of service, like what you do, Spence, you are of service to your audience and you establish your expertise, and there comes the trust. You can help. They don't have to go listen to me talking about evaluating plugins because you're doing it for them. There are so many different ways to go with an LMS system, but you and I know, like, what are the core ones that we know are going to have longevity, that are going to have the best, support behind it, the type of thing. We can listen to our customers, listen to these people, understand what they're talking about, and help them, like we're dating experts, right? We can help
Yeah.
them make these kinds of
That's
decisions
actually a great
based on
metaphor.
what we know,
Yeah.
because we know the
Well,
people.
well, okay. So like, let's keep going on that concept because I want to bring all these topics together. And I think my brain works in that way. Like it's just a bunch of stuff floating around, but we threw out a few things and let's tie this together. So there are two columns I say all the time of people interested in WordPress. There's the column of people that we refer to who are like, I'm going to make stuff. I'm really into the code. I want to know about the community. That
Yeah.
used to be a little different than it is today, but it's still a very exciting and inviting thing. But you know what? I can enjoy going to a house that has IKEA furniture without knowing how IKEA furniture is made. I can enjoy using stuff that's made from hardware at the hardware store without having to be into the hardware. So that column is useful and it's a conversation. The second is the people who just need the result, where I think we're saying the same thing again and again. And that's what I've made my own focus, is to say, instead of focusing on introducing yourself as a person wanting to make a livelihood or a side hustle in WordPress, instead of focusing on the making stuff per se column, instead look at the group of people, many of whom have not yet started to know about WordPress or could care less what WordPress is, and say, how can I find you as a business owner, as a parents club, as a kid who just needs a website or something, and be of service to you? And I'll use the stuff that I have given to me in a special way. Because let me use an anecdote. When I used to build custom houses and apartments, this is the early days of IKEA. We used to order all of our components from wherever was good. There was Italian cabinets we could get from overseas, and it would take 5 months and have to pre-order. And then IKEA came along, and it was indistinguishable in many cases when you use some of those cabinets from what was overseas at a fraction of the price. But we didn't have to have all those problems. So we started using that. And I know for a fact to this day, I mean, I used to sell houses in those days, not tens of millions, but up to a couple $1,000,000. They were crazy houses. None of the buyers could tell the difference between the IKEA cabinets because they were made in the same place. So the point I'm saying is, nobody cares when you go to a restaurant where the ingredients were bought, as long as they taste fresh, they taste right, they're given with care and love and cleanliness and customer service, right?
Yeah.
You know, those Cisco cans, those giant cans of food, there's like a joke, but like some of the best restaurants in the world just open a can and put it on a plate, but they serve it in a fantastic way. So that is what I'm suggesting the future of WordPress involves, and where my focus would be, and where I think you have an interest, I hope, in joining me, because we talked about this, that what if we reinvented WordPress into the very same things that other platforms are doing anyway? if you look at some of the CRMs, or if you look at some of the membership sites, the community sites, what they really make their money on is, look, we've got you covered. We're the concierge in your proverbial hotel. But more importantly, we can make it financially feasible for you to make a side hustle without having to learn bash scripts or JavaScript or PHP, without fighting the politics, without worrying about being bought or crushed or anything. We're just going to give you in one place all the software, all the support, all the inspiration. And this minute launch thing that I'm tying in is like I didn't mean to cut you off there. The minute launch thing is the concept of like recipes. Remember those game shows where like you'd have the freezer full of stuff and there's 5 contestants, and I don't know, there's the Great British Bake Off sort of does this. There was the Gordon Ramsay, there was Iron Chef. All the contestants are told, here's what you need to make from the ingredients, and go grab what you think and make it. Well, what if we did the same thing? Instead of making it so confusing for people who don't care what WordPress is, to create something. What if we just said, here's the features that your probable relationships want. Here they are in either ready to go format or fully documented 1, 2, 3 recipes. And you also have somebody there like your concierge, Spence, what the heck is going on? How does this work? So that you could then be helped to just be better at helping human beings. What are you selling? You're selling your help. You're selling your humanity. You're selling your relationship.
Right.
Nobody cares what's under the hood.
Right.
So that was my, hold on, I need to play the, because like at the end of the day, remember, one last metaphor, please. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm totally going on Spence Gone Wild. I like Shark Tank. And one of the best products ever, of course, was Sponge Daddy, right?
Yeah.
And the story of Sponge Daddy was, it's just this funny little piece of special material that the guy had bought because he was in some other business and he was going out of business, but he remembered he had a box of the stuff, and it was like when it got hot and wet, it changed its characteristics. So it became perfect for this device, and he made the little smiley face and he figured out how to market it. The point was, something as stupid simple as a piece of inflated foam marketed the right way became like 100 million to, I don't even know, like $1 billion business.
It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't for all the 8 million different inventions. It was, he understood what people wanted.
Right. Right. And he marketed it well, and he made it fun, and it's so simple. It doesn't have to be, nobody wants to know like what that material is. They just want to scrub the kitchen sink or whatever they're doing with it, right? They just like, help me solve my problem, help me do what I intend to do for the day, and make it fun. Because like trustworthy, make it be affordable, like all of those components. But it really foundationally comes down to, can I trust this product to do the thing I need that to help me do my job? You know, it's
and the person, right? Like, isn't that it? Like, in other words, Kathy, I trust for her advice on my security needs or on this website solution, or they really probably don't want to understand what happens behind the scenes of what Kathy does. Or
no, you don't want to see it.
Well, there's 2 parts to it, because like having moved into this new house, I understood like I have some able-bodied teenagers. I could force my kids to do all the moving, but I ended up hiring a company. They ended up becoming a client, but like, that's another story. The company had 6 very strong dudes, 7 hours, and it cost $3,500. After they did it, I realized I would have paid them 10 grand. Why? Because I realized what an ordeal that was, how much labor. And I think at the end of the day, most customers don't care today how they get to the result. And I have seen personally that they're willing to go from, hi, Spence, I just met you on a free call, to, you're the first person who actually asked me about me, listened to my problems, told me what you thought honestly for free, and then gave me a way to immediately, in incremental steps, get to where I wanted to be. Like you said, I trusted you. You said what a person would say to me, not what some bullshit sales team would say to me. And you gave me
so much value in that. There's so much value in that. You know, when I worked at, and I was working for Leo Burnett's interactive agency on this airline website, United, and worked downtown, had to take, the Kennedy out. And then I was living in the Western Burbs at the time. And so I was driving a lot, but they trusted me. And I had relationships for the longest time with the people I worked there because the internet was so new to them. It was like trying to it was a game changer, at the time, to change the travel industry and have people go from travel agents to buying tickets for their flights on a website was crazy. I'm like talking to them about like pivoting over to do email support. And they're all like on phones, and it was like trying to get the boat to turn, the giant boat to turn, because the iceberg of an industry change is coming at them. But because I was able to explain, okay, this is how DNS works in a way, much like you do, with metaphors, with just like helping them understand what it was that they were dealing with, it was invaluable. And so I kept those relationships because they were calling me even after I was gone and had my own agency, and there was no way that they were going to come with me at that point. I mean, it's just me, and I was like so young. And anyway, but they were calling me and asking me questions. They're telling me this. Do you think that this is the way it should go? Like asking me, a young kid, my advice about the internet, because I explained things to them so well.
The thing that's interesting about that part of the scene is that I don't think technology is inherently bad when it disrupts. I like to think of it like a snow globe that gets shaken up. Everything was stable, and then something comes along and shakes it.
Yes.
It, to me, democratizes the opportunity, because that's where it doesn't matter young or old. A lot of times it is the young whiz kid, but it could be, in our case, I'm saying it's democratizing what was otherwise a very static environment of gatekeepers and politics and whatever. And even the stuff we're talking about, where in a world where I don't know how many years is it going to be that we'll still be looking at flat screens versus wearable devices, earpieces. We can see with AI and the technology that pretty soon it may not be implanted in your head, but it's going to be like your world is going to have augmented stuff.
Yeah.
Not just, oh, I got to get my laptop or my tablet or my phone out. And so when that happens, I question, for a lot of people, what is all the investment and time you're putting into this business that like puts web pages up versus investing your time into a business where you have humans who think are their concierge to whatever changes come about. And
Right.
if I was to be really bold here, this is to me the shaking up of the WordPress. After 20 years here, we didn't start with the idea that someday there was going to be a company that owns 50 WordPress plugins and another one worth 250 million and another one that took $1 billion. We never thought that was going to happen. But let's say that that's the case. The disruptive part is, because it's open source and because the software may or may not run on different devices in the future, right now, anybody who's listening to this, who's of any age, especially somebody old enough to remember when you used to work with paper, can go find other people like them, their friends, their family, their business colleagues, people they went to school with, who's like, look, I'm lost. I need help. And if you build the business around just having that relationship, anything else they need can be delivered through you. And I'm going to tie this together with the topics that it's kind of going one step further. You and I are really interested in going farther with. Number one, the humanity element of business is uniquely Gen X and above. I think that the younger generation, because they were raised on like everything is just self-serve automatic, they don't understand that. But that is so critical because people aren't dying anytime soon. And if you just focus on a niche of people your age or older who have that experience, infinite customers with tons of money. Two, filtering the technology with the help of, let's say, your own concierge, so that when the next thing comes out 6 minutes from now, you don't have to be like worrying about it. It can be spoon fed to you. Three, the technology security, because all these new toys bring all kinds of new things that can interrupt a person's business, their life, and so forth. You have a unique expertise in that I want to further tap into for what we're doing, and vice versa, because I think it goes hand in hand. And then four, it's where is this planet going with human beings? And I want to tie this in because we all have problems. You and I have a lot of family related stuff, health related stuff, health with our family members and personally, these struggles, in our opinion, I think, if I speak for you, should be part of your conversation because I think they really reflect well on you as a person with things to offer. When people see you are imperfect, when you struggle, when you have a
Yeah.
bag of stuff that needs to go to Goodwill behind you during a live event, they realize that's just like me. This guy can't get his audio worked out after 19 years of broadcasting. And I think these are things that we want to cover in the form of a
Yeah.
newsletter and the conversation, concierge support, and so forth. What do you think?
It's all authenticity. It's you cannot. I was actually just having Michelle Frechette and I do a podcast together. WP Motivate, check it out. But we were talking about authenticity and how important it is because you can put on the perfect face. You can get up there and say all of the right things. But at some point, if those things aren't an actual reflection of who you really are, it's a lie. And lies, with the whole thing, there's an adage about it, and I can't remember, but if you lie, you're going to have to tell another lie to support that, and then another lie. And then all of a sudden, your public persona or the way people see you is over there, so far away from who you really are. But who you really are, your authenticity of your experiences, your values, your beliefs, all of those things, if they are in the right place, they it's the I can't think of the right word, but the trump card. It's your
I mean,
winning
I think it's your
combo.
secret sauce. That's what
It's the
I'm going to
secret
say.
sauce. That's it. I like that. It is the secret sauce because no one else is Spence. No one else is Kathy Zant.
Right.
No one else is, insert name here. There's no competition. But if you create this persona and then step into that and try to be this persona of someone that you're not, that's replaceable. That's like you trying to be someone else. Maybe you see somebody else and they're doing something and you want to take some of those things. You can model those types of things, but you have to integrate that in with your identity and who you really are, because if you are trying to be something that you're not, eventually it's just a paper facade that falls down. And I think people see that and they feel it when you're authentic and you really show up as yourself, whether you're on stage, a live stream, or just on a customer call. They know, they feel it. It's almost like this unspoken undercurrent of a conversation that establishes who you really are. And if you build your personal brand and you build your business based on that, there's no competition.
I think that's actually a really key point. And I'm glad you brought that up because when it comes to things like our traditional SEO or paid advertisement or all the channels that came about over the last 20 years that have now kind of been revealed to have a new sheriff in town, right, with AI. So all these companies are worried about and my SERPs are off and my SEO rating is only 76 on this page and I can't sleep at night. And I've been saying for so long, and I'm so happy not to be so much right, but to be consistently saying the same thing long enough that 30 years passes and bell-bottom jeans are back in again, right? Big collar shirts, avocado appliances are around the corner.
There are
That
some fundamental things that just don't change. If you adhere to those particular things, you don't have to you don't have to put AI at the name of your business
right?
because you are you. You know what I mean? You don't have to go with the next greatest fad because it's all just going to come down to the fundamentals.
Exactly. And this is the part that, again, I get really, this is my weird new agey version of Spence. So I say I'm a spiritual being having a human existence. And I've been
Yes.
an entrepreneur capitalist since I was 10 years old. I have all those funny stories, but I still have right now the five senses. And some of my senses seem to be more in tune than others. And I've got bad hearing, bad eyes, whatever. My smell is awesome, by the way. But my intuition is the sixth sense.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I share a lot of conversations on this privately. We may go into them publicly, but that has always served me well. Even as I'm talking here, I'm getting a little bit of that. I think that the new version of capitalism, the after end stage capitalism, is actually going to be where more people are intuitively understanding with whom they should associate and how to do business. And when I brought up publicly, not to be ad hominem attacking people, but like to ask a person, you have $100 million. Why do you have to win everything now? Like you're worth not, you work for Blackstone, you have $9 billion. Why are you hoarding $9 billion? I'm not against capitalism. I'm not against success, but we're all essentially as human beings on this lifeboat of Earth. And I think that one of the business things that you and I will delve into, and I think it resonates with a lot of people, is how can you be focused on successfully using capitalism in a way that benefits other human beings and not the things that have led to where we're at today, where there is such a gulf between
Yeah.
the haves and the have-nots, and because nobody on a life raft succeeds when the people on one side are hoarding all the food and the people on the other side are hungry with a knife in their hand. And I
Yeah.
think that's the situation that we're really looking at for a new world to make things better, whether it's with WordPress or the business or just helping people for other cool new stuff that comes along. When we think of other people as much as ourselves, we can all win. And the last part, and because we're at the top of the hour, and I want to thank you for taking so much time on this, is that like what confuses me as like I'm like my mom says, you look like Dr. House, but like Dr. House is always looking for that diagnosis. It's when I don't shave and my hair gets long. Is that I don't understand the way some people think, because having been on a journey, my hero's journey, first trimester, very successful, made millions. Second 30 years was like, wait, just wait, Spence. Here comes all the fun with the marriages and the kids and the divorce and all the da 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 da. But that third trimester, to me, feels like I'm in a unique position to be a spokesperson or help people understand there's been no difference in my happiness between young and old, broke and millionaire, all the things in between. The best part of the journey was when I was solving problems to help people.
Hmm.
And when you get paid for that, it's fine, but not at the expense of people, where
Right.
I'm preaching a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, like if somebody says, I want to cancel, I go, here's your money back. And it
Yeah.
was good to know you. And if I can ever help you again, let me, not like do 7 steps and jump through a hoop and take a picture of yourself and I'll give you a cherry on top, maybe. Like,
Yeah.
what is the value of that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's I think also you are in having had all of those experiences, and I've had my own interesting experiences as well. But we are at a place now where humanity is in, I believe every single one of us has that inner knowing. We know. But we also have, the entirety of human knowledge
It's cool.
at our fingertips. Hey, I'm not going to do it, but you can
Right.
ask a
Right.
question. It's going to come
Can't
back
say
with
it.
an answer.
It'll trigger my house to go up.
Exactly. Those demos don't work. But the entirety of human knowledge is at our fingertips, in our pocket at all times. And so many of us like I'll ask that rather than, like 5 times 7, like the number, like we're breaking our we're atrophying our muscle of knowing how to do math on it without using a calculator, of knowing who we really are and knowing what the next steps are. And I think we are at this place where we need to start really making some decisions. Are we going to completely rely on technology and human knowledge from the past? Because all of that stuff is from the past. Or are we going to step into this new future of what humans can be? But in order to do that, humans have to expand, right? Humans have to expand in their knowledge, their intuition, their abilities, their capabilities, and kind of empowerment, right? And that's one of the reasons why I do love WordPress and I do love open source, is because of that empowerment, because people can get to know who they really are, and not just get to know who they are based on all of this collection of experiences from the past, but what is your potential? What can you grow into? What is it that you want, and make that happen?
It does. It democratizes it. It removes the gatekeepers. And I don't feel that I have any interest in there was a moment for like a year that I was all about I'm going to show everybody what naughtiness is going on. I'm no longer interested in that, because what I've decided, and I think this is strategic personal decision, is that the world is always going to have people that do naughty things. That's their prerogative. You can address it and try to focus a light on it and see if that's helpful. In many cases, it might be. But in this case, there's nobody that's like a criminal in WordPress. They're just doing things I don't agree with the same stuff. So I figure the better way to solve the problem is what we're talking about now, which is, what if we showed people an alternative where the gates are down and everybody can go back to benefiting in a democratic way, because they're not buying the software, they're buying essentially the community aspect. They're buying into the idea that, like, anybody, a kid or an older person, can come on the scene and get a solution or make a solution or be clever. Because I think when we start to look out for others before ourselves, whether you're a singular entrepreneur or the CEO of $100 million company, the rest of the world benefits. And I think that example we talked about with the iced tea CEO or some of the other CEOs is really reflective of that. If more companies did that, the value from attention, social media, all the other things would start to shift in that direction as well. Because we've all seen when naughty behavior gets attention, but it just turns into endless negativity, versus when something good happens, the media doesn't like to talk about it, but when other people notice it, it does get attention. And so anyway, I'm not preaching as much as leading into what I want to leave people with today. And a lot of our audience sees this live, a few folks, but like most of the people are going to watch it afterwards, is that there's three big things that I think are coming down the pipe. Number one, I kept my promise, which was that LaunchKit version 2 is available in the repository. I'm not going to do any tech here, but I'm going to do a follow-up videos. That means that anybody can access the tool set for free that enables WordPress experience to be incredibly smooth and easy as an administrator, creator, whatever. Number two, the things that go inside of the LaunchKit are available at a price that are ridiculous compared to the value, along with the other support. Number three is that I hope that you and I will be able to publicly announce more details. We have some ideas we're talking about that cover these other esoteric topics, as well as the things that come from this relationship type of a business. So the security, the psychology, the GenX mindset, the humanity, the building a business in a world of whatever. And that's going to cover something along the lines from free to paid, but in a way that represents really true value. Because what I have always found is that value ladders are value ladders. If you give somebody a way to succeed initially, they always come back and pay more. They do more. And they do it because you've given them like feed a guy a day, blah, blah, blah. If you give the person a way to get success today, they always come back saying, wow, and they share it with others. So I hope that you and I can talk more officially about this, but I'm setting my flag in the sand to say, I bitched and moaned about this for 2 years on the WP Tonic show. Then I went and did it for the 6 months, and I met the date. So it's officially here and now. The brand of Minute Launch is not going to take away from LaunchKit or buying at Launchify. It's just a metaphor for recipes, where Minute Launch is going to be a publishing platform for the recipes that people use the kit or our newsletter or our other advice. And yourself and some other key individuals are going to be participatory, I hope, to allow us to create a new metaphor of what WordPress is doing or thought of under the hood, but not worrying about all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Ta-da! That was
exciting.
Anyway, Kathy,
and I found you in the repo, so I'm gonna go play.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna make some videos because I'm gonna do just one thing. I want to just do one thing. This is not a tech thing, but because you're here, I'm gonna go on the line here, and I want to just show something real quick. You guys can see the screen. One of the things that is so unique about this is, let's just talk about the one key thing. When you go to IKEA or you go to the Lego store, they don't send you out to 20 other places to go 20 other subscriptions with 20 other strangers to go make something. Everything is in one place. And here's an example of this. If I were to go to the repository, WordPress.org LaunchKit, and I'm using a launcher called InstaWP, but you could do this for your clients, for yourself. Doesn't make a difference. Watch, I'm going to just launch a new site. This is an example of how it instantly makes your whole world difference. Anybody who has done WordPress in the last 5 minutes or 20 years knows how ridiculously simple this is. Now watch. LaunchKit is here. Number one, there's these key things. These 5 things make the whole experience fixed and better for what is broken now in WordPress, in my opinion, with the way that it just hijacks your experience. This last one allows you, if you wanted to white label it and hide the LaunchKit menu from your clients. So for example, if you didn't want to show LaunchKit, you'd save that and LaunchKit is gone, but it's actually still there. You just know to use this. Now let's turn that off just for the sake of argument. Here's the number 2 thing. Out of the box, this free part makes things amazing. Number 2, whether it's a free or paid account, if you get an account at WP Launchify, stay as long as you want. Everything you get, you own from day one, but with one relationship and one login. You can use it on an unlimited number of clients. So whatever hosting, whatever clients you have, this is all yours with one relationship. I always ask people, please use the Cadence theme because a lot of the patterns and stuff are with Cadence. So just click a button, it's installed. Number 2, I click here and I install the 88 or so plugins. Many of them are pro plugins, but again, through the open source ability of this, you have anything you need to essentially launch a business solution or use the things you need. If you wanted to, you could also use this prime mover to allow you to have pre-made packages. And these packages are things that currently right now, I've got some example ones that start you out. Like, I just need a membership site. I need an e-commerce site. I need a site for a newsletter. There will be an infinite library of choices. And there's also the ability for you to make, create, share, and sell your own packages with the same tool that's in there. So you can sell them on your own website for your clients. Now, here's the cool part. Right now, I'm essentially done. I have everything I need to start and run a WordPress site, whether I highlighted the plugins individually or I just bulk turned them on. That's it. That was it. The whole experience. I now have the store of IKEA, the store of Legos ready to go. And as crazy as it sounds, I could even take whether it's from the Cadence library or if where I do the pattern library I've got at Launch Flows, I could take like a really cool, complex idea that was created by Spence or created by somebody else, copy it, paste it into the kit, turn on the plugins that make e-commerce or LMS or anything else, and I'm up and running or whatever. And the reason that this to me is such a game changer is, what is the real experience now in WordPress? Number 1, you have to figure out a host. What the hell is going on with that? Number 2, you have to then set up the core. You need to go out and find which plugins to buy or get for free, any of which could conflict. You have to install them manually after paying for them, doing the subscriptions, getting all the license keys. Then you have to decide on a theme. Then you have to decide how to set up the base of the theme. Then you have to understand which plugins will break the theme or the theme will break the play. And I go, da, 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 da. And you might be 27 steps and 3 months down the road. Or you do this, and it's like at IKEA, anything you buy at IKEA works with IKEA because they meet. And I think the curation part of that is essential. The relationships that you and I will talk about, and I'll leave this for another time, is that to benefit everybody in the ecosystem, if you make something with this kit, or if you make something that is a tool that could be useful in the kit, the revenue sharing part of it is inherent to what we're going to do or what I'm doing with this, in the sense of like, there's no reason not to benefit the people who either send their clients into this or build stuff for this. But without that, there's no reason for people to have to, like, I don't know, metaphorically, spend $3,000 on a tuxedo or a dress for your cousin Vinny's wedding, not knowing whether you need it or not. With this, you could actually get something today in 3 minutes, understand what you're going to do with it, and from there decide what else you're going to do in your relationships. Okay. I didn't think I was going to throw that in, but that was my free throw in. Kathy, thank you, by the way, for all the time today. And I look forward to sharing more with everybody about what we're going to do in the future. But for today, I hope you enjoy the rest of your post 4th of July, 5th of July. And I'm going to do the same. I suppose one of the things that I would like to say is I hope everybody who has questions here today will try out LaunchKit. Send in a question or email about what kind of stuff you'd like to see from what we talked about, because Kathy and I will be talking more about it. Kathy, is there anywhere else you would like to send folks besides maybe your website to keep in touch?
Zant.com is my website, but also, I've got my YouTube channel. I've got some security content over there. If you want to subscribe over there, I'm active on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you want to find me.
I like the fact, by the way, that you somehow managed to get the Zant.com, which that is
Like
awesome.
1998. You
That's
jump
what
on it. That's the thing. It's like,
right?
it was, and then I'm like, can I really justify spending? Because it was like just network solutions back then. Can I justify $35 a year for this? And
By the
now,
way, hold on. That is a topic right there, because I remember sitting at my desk in 1995 with a friend who was retired from the trading markets, and we used to be in our jammies playing like through an ISDN connection, Doom or Command and Conquer. And that's when I started buying domain names like Hairless Dog or SpencerForeman.com. And I remember going, I should buy 5-letter this and 4. And then I looked at Network Solutions and it was like 3-letter domain was like $1,000. And I'm like,
yeah,
that was a lot of money in 1995 in
yeah.
hindsight. So I wonder what the new like flags in the sand will be for people today to stake their name and so forth. But we have tons of those stories to share.
You got to shake that snow globe. Shake it, Spence.
Anyway,
Shake the snow
all right.
globe so we can have opportunities.
I've kept you too long. I'll let you go. Thank you very much. I appreciate everything you've done for the community and for me today with helping out on the show. And I look forward to working with you more. For everybody else who's come along, thanks. I hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you on the next video. Bye.
Bye.